The night air was heavy with fog, as Detective Richard Hale said, "Something about this scene feels wrong." He crouched near the deserted Los Angeles lot, his eyes tracing the unnatural stillness of the ground. Sarah Mitchell said, "The report claimed children stumbled upon the body here at dawn, yet nothing explains why this place feels colder than the rest of the city." Richard exhaled slowly, his voice low, "Because this ground remembers." The fog clung tighter, carrying silence, while unseen eyes seemed to linger from the shadows. A streetlight flickered, throwing pale light against the asphalt. Sarah said, "I have seen death before, but this feels staged, theatrical." Richard whispered, "Then let us find out who wrote the script." The silence pressed against them, broken only by the faint hum of distant city traffic, as if Los Angeles itself was holding its breath. Richard Hale said, "This place tells a story no one wants to read." Sarah Mitchell replied, "You mean the silence feels heavier than the crime itself?" Richard scanned the empty lot, his trench coat fluttering. "Someone orchestrated this silence," he whispered. Sarah shook her head slowly, her voice trembling. "Whoever it was, they wanted the city to watch and never forget." Richard tightened his jaw, staring at the cracked ground, his voice sharp. "Then they will regret leaving their mark here." The sound of an owl echoed, cutting through their thoughts. Sarah whispered, "This city hides more than bodies. It hides sins." Richard stood straighter, his breath steady. "Then let us become its reckoning." Sarah said, "Why leave her here in the open?" Richard's voice cut the silence, "Because the city itself was meant to be the witness." Sarah shifted nervously, glancing around. Richard's tone hardened. "This was no accident. Every choice was deliberate." Sarah muttered, "Then the killer is not just a murderer, but an author of fear." Richard stared across the lot, his trench coat swaying. "An author, yes, and we are reading their pages too late." The distant hum of traffic felt mocking, detached from the horror beneath their feet. Sarah exhaled, her voice quieter. "The pages may be torn, but we will piece them back together." Richard's eyes narrowed, "Even if the ink stains us forever." Richard said, "The body was left here not just to shock but to taunt." Sarah whispered, "Taunt who? The police? The press?" Richard turned toward her, his voice firm, "All of us. The entire city." Sarah frowned, her voice breaking. "Then every passerby is a victim of this cruelty." Richard's eyes glimmered with restrained anger, cruelty wrapped in theater. The street lamp flickered once more, adding weight to his words. Sarah muttered, "Theatrics like this mean arrogance." Richard said sharply, "And arrogance leaves cracks, even in darkness." A dog barked distantly, the echo collapsing quickly in the fog. Sarah's voice steadied, "Then we will find where those cracks bleed truth." Sarah said, "This case will consume you if you let it." Richard answered, "It already has." Sarah's voice trembled, "You cannot carry this weight alone." Richard clenched his jaw, eyes cold. "Truth carries itself. I only follow." Sarah placed a hand on her chest, her voice steadying, "But obsession blinds." Richard's tone deepened, "Better blinded by truth than comfortable in lies." The fog thickened, swirling around them as silence stretched. Sarah whispered, "And if the truth is darker than we imagine?" Richard's voice grew quieter, yet firm. "Then the city must learn to see in the dark." A crow called sharply in the distance, breaking the stillness with omen-like finality. Sarah Mitchell said, "The press painted Elizabeth Short as a woman of mystery." Richard Hale's voice carried grit. "Mystery often becomes the mask for tragedy." Sarah unfolded a yellow newspaper, headlines screaming in bold. Richard muttered, "They turned her into a spectacle before the body was even cold." Sarah's eyes narrowed, the world fed on her image, yet none cared to see her pain. Richard leaned closer. "That's the danger, the dead cannot speak, so others write their story." Sarah whispered, "And we read lies until truth drowns in ink." Richard's tone was heavy. "We must strip the paper clean and see the woman beneath." The silence in the dimly lit office pressed tighter, only the ticking of a clock echoing in rhythm with their thoughts. Richard Hale said, she came to Los Angeles chasing dreams, yet the city only devours the desperate. Sarah whispered, Elizabeth Short deserved more than whispers of scandal. Richard tapped the crime file, but scandal makes better headlines than sorrow. Sarah sighed, her story was swallowed by the hunger for sensation. Richard's eyes narrowed, then we'll tell it differently. Sarah nodded slowly, by finding her truth, we may give her dignity back. Richard said, dignity is often stolen long before the grave. Sarah placed the file down gently, her voice breaking. Then we will take it back piece by piece. The office window rattled from the wind outside, as though the city itself tried to silence their resolve. Sarah Mitchell said, they called her the Black Dahlia for her dark beauty. Richard Hale shook his head, a nickname to strip away her humanity. Sarah's voice trembled. It made her a myth instead of a woman. Richard's tone sharpened. Myths don't bleed, but Elizabeth did. Sarah lowered her gaze. They dressed her name in glamour and forgot her suffering. Richard's eyes darkened, and those who hid behind that glamour knew exactly what they were doing. Sarah whispered, every lie builds another wall between her and justice. Richard clenched his fist. Then we break the walls until only truth stands. The shadows around them deepened, as if the darkness listened, waiting for its secrets to remain hidden. Richard Hale said, she wanted to be an actress, and the city used her ambition as bait. Sarah Mitchell replied, Hollywood devours dreams faster than it creates stars. Richard's jaw tightened, her face became a headline while her soul remained unknown. Sarah's voice trembled. She deserved applause, not pity and death. Richard leaned back, voice low. The applause was stolen by those who profit from tragedy. Sarah whispered, then we must shine a spotlight that burns away the shadows. Richard's gaze hardened and exposed those who feared her truth. The ticking clock in the office seemed louder, marking each second of failure they were determined to erase. Sarah Mitchell said, the police files speak more of politics than pursuit. Richard Hale growled, politics bury truth deeper than any grave. Sarah whispered, did they want to protect her or silence her? Richard's tone was sharp silence, always silence. Sarah's hand trembled on the file. Then we are digging against forces greater than us. Richard's voice darkened. That is exactly why we cannot stop. Sarah's tone softened. The city is not ready for what we may find. Richard's jaw tightened. Readiness is irrelevant. Truth does not wait for comfort. Outside, the faint wail of a siren cut through the night, like a cry of warning from the restless city. Richard Hale said, every lead points to locked doors and silenced lips. Sarah Mitchell replied, then perhaps we need someone who knows the city's hidden language. Richard raised an eyebrow. You mean Dr. Samuel Carter? Sarah nodded. Yes, the coroner who walked away from the case. Richard muttered, he's a man who fears shadows more than truth. Sarah's tone softened, yet he may hold answers no one else will give. Richard sighed. Then, we force him to remember. Sarah whispered, sometimes remembering is more dangerous than forgetting. Richard's jaw clenched, and sometimes forgetting is the reason killers walk free. Dr. Samuel Carter said, I left because this case was never about truth. Richard Hale's voice cut sharp. Then what was it about? Carter's eyes darted. Power, silence, and fear. Sarah Mitchell leaned closer. Fear of what? Carter whispered, of who? Richard's eyes narrowed. Names, Doctor. Carter's hand trembled. Names that do not forgive curiosity. Sarah said firmly, then curiosity is the only weapon we have. Richard's voice rumbled low, and weapons must be aimed. Carter whispered, aim wrong, and you'll be buried beside her. Silence wrapped the booth, broken only by the hiss of rain outside. Richard Hale said, you speak like a man already defeated. Dr. Samuel Carter's voice cracked. Defeat is survival when shadows hunt truth. Sarah Mitchell said, you fear the wrong side of this story. Carter muttered, there are no right sides, only graves filled with silence. Richard's jaw tightened, and yet here we sit, unburied, still breathing. Sarah's voice sharpened, then speak, Doctor, before silence wins again. Carter exhaled heavily. The files were altered, evidence vanished, and witnesses disappeared. Richard's voice grew harsh. Altered by whom? Carter's eyes lowered. Ask the ones who smile too much when the truth is mentioned. Sarah whispered, a deceiver among us. Sarah Mitchell said, if deception guides us, then trust becomes poison. Richard Hale whispered, someone close is feeding us lies. Dr. Samuel Carter added, the deceiver hides behind sympathy, never suspicion. Richard's jaw set. Then we watch those who stand too near our fire. Sarah frowned, but who among us is willing to betray? Carter's eyes dropped. The same who offers comfort when comfort is least deserved. Richard muttered, masks are always smiling before they fall. Sarah's tone carried unease, and when it falls, will we survive the truth beneath? Silence weighed heavy, thicker than the rain beating against glass. Richard Hale said, truth often walks into a room wearing riddles. A stranger approached, sliding a note across the table. The man whispered, be careful where you dig. Sarah Mitchell's eyes widened. Who are you? The stranger smirked faintly, an informant who prefers shadows. Richard leaned forward. What do you gain by feeding us crumbs? The man replied, what you find will burn both of us. Sarah's voice trembled. Then why help? The stranger's gaze hardened, because the fire has already started. Richard clenched the note, his voice low. Then let's see how far the flames reach. The stranger vanished into the rain, leaving silence behind. Richard Hale said, corruption stains deeper than blood. Sarah Mitchell whispered, then we are walking straight into its core. A letter arrived, sealed with an emblem of power. Richard tore it open, his voice sharp, we've been summoned. Sarah frowned, by whom? Richard's eyes hardened, by Councilman Edward Monroe. Sarah's voice trembled, the one who funded the investigation's silence. Richard nodded grimly, the keeper of secrets himself. Sarah muttered, he hides behind polished speeches while corpses rot in shadows. Richard said, then we strip the polish and expose the decay. The room darkened as thunder rolled outside, as though the city itself recoiled from the name. Councilman Edward Monroe greeted, Detective Hale, Miss Mitchell, welcome. Richard Hale's jaw tensed. Welcome is a strange word for this meeting. Monroe's calm smile lingered. I prefer diplomacy over confrontation. Sarah Mitchell said coldly. Diplomacy sounds like another mask for silence. Monroe leaned back, voice smooth. Some truths are not meant for daylight. Richard's tone sharpened. Then why bury them beneath corpses? Monroe chuckled softly, because shadows are safer than chaos. Sarah's voice cracked. Safer for whom? Monroe's eyes glimmered. For everyone. Especially you. The silence between them thickened, each word hanging like smoke in the council chamber. Richard Hale said, you silence truth because it threatens your throne. Monroe smiled faintly. I silence it because truth kills quicker than lies. Sarah Mitchell leaned forward. Then you play God with people's lives. Monroe's calm voice deepened. I preserve order, Miss Mitchell. Richard growled. Order built on bodies is no order at all. Monroe's gaze hardened. The city thrives when its citizens remain blind. Sarah whispered fiercely. Then we will force them to see. Monroe smirked. Blind eyes do not open without pain. Richard's tone grew darker. Then let the pain come, because silence will not last. The storm outside cracked lightning across the sky. Sarah Mitchell whispered, he toys with us, Richard. Richard Hale's jaw clenched. He toys with the entire city. Monroe's voice was cold. You speak as if your search is noble, yet nobility burns like paper. Richard said sharply, truth doesn't burn, it survives. Monroe smiled faintly. Then why does every seeker of it end up buried? Sarah's voice broke. You fear exposure, not chaos. Monroe's eyes flickered. Fear is what keeps the city alive. Richard's tone was steel. No, fear keeps it chained. The silence that followed carried the weight of power against defiance, a balance on the edge of breaking. Richard Hale stood. We will not be part of your silence. Monroe's smile faded. Then you will be buried beneath it. Sarah Mitchell said firmly, if truth dies, so does justice. Monroe leaned closer, voice sharp, justice bends to power. Richard's voice thundered, not this time. Monroe's cold tone lingered, you will regret those words. Sarah whispered, only if we fail. Richard's eyes locked on Monroe, and failure is not in our script. Thunder cracked violently outside, shaking the windows, as though the city itself roared in warning. Richard Hale said, Monroe's warning was not a threat, it was a promise. Sarah Mitchell replied, then promises like his only grow sharper in the dark. Richard tightened his jaw. Still, one of our own fed him words we never spoke outside these walls. Sarah's voice trembled. You mean betrayal? Richard nodded grimly. The deceiver hides closer than we feared. Sarah's tone hardened. Then suspicion becomes our only companion. Richard whispered, and trust becomes poison. Sarah's hands shook as she said, if betrayal cuts us, will we survive the bleeding? Richard's eyes narrowed. We have no choice but to survive. The silence between them grew heavy, almost unbearable. Sarah Mitchell said, we trusted Dr. Samuel Carter, but his fear may hide more than caution. Richard Hale's voice cut low. Fear makes men lie when silence isn't enough. Carter's eyes darted nervously. I told you what I could. Richard stepped closer, or what you wanted us to hear. Sarah's gaze pierced him. You led us in circles. Carter's voice cracked. I only tried to protect myself. Richard said sharply, and in doing so you betrayed her. Carter lowered his head whispering, perhaps betrayal was survival. Richard's tone was cold steel. Survival that buries truth is no survival at all. Richard Hale said, you were not afraid of shadows, Carter. You were working with them. Carter stammered. No, I never chose their side. Sarah Mitchell hissed, but you let them use your silence. Richard's eyes burned. Your silence fed their lies. Carter's voice trembled. They threatened my family. Sarah's voice broke. And what of Elizabeth's family? Who threatened them? Richard leaned closer, his words like knives. Every man who chose silence. Carter whispered, you do not understand the reach of their power. Richard's voice thundered, power fades, but betrayal leaves scars that never heal. Sarah Mitchell whispered, betrayal cuts deeper when it wears the mask of an ally. Richard Hale said, masks always crack under pressure. Carter's voice was weak. You think the killer is the only one hiding? The city itself wears a mask. Richard's eyes narrowed. Then the mask will break tonight. Sarah muttered, but the cracks will not spare us either. Richard's tone was sharp. I'd rather bleed from cracks than choke on silence. Carter sighed heavily. You do not know the monsters you are calling into the light. Richard whispered, then let the monsters see the light for once. Richard Hale said, the deceiver thrives on the cracks between us. Sarah Mitchell replied, then we seal those cracks with truth. Carter whispered, truth is a blade that cuts both ways. Richard's eyes hardened, better cut by truth than chained by lies. Sarah's voice was fierce. Elizabeth deserves more than half-spoken confessions. Carter muttered, her story is a cage, and we are all trapped inside it. Richard's tone was fire, then we break the cage. Sarah whispered, even if it means shattering everything around us. Richard growled, especially if it means that. The rain outside seemed to roar in agreement. Richard Hale said, every step deeper drags us closer to the abyss. Sarah Mitchell whispered, then perhaps the abyss is the only place the truth hides. Richard's voice grew colder, and those who stare into it never return the same. Sarah's eyes reflected fear, but Elizabeth deserves more than silence, even if it destroys us. Richard clenched his jaw. Destruction is the price of revelation. The wind outside howled through broken windows, carrying the sound of the city's unrest. Sarah muttered, even shadows seem to fear what we chase. Richard's tone sharpened, then we chase harder. Their silence afterward was louder than thunder, a vow carved in the storm. Sarah Mitchell whispered, this place feels like a tomb. Richard Hale's voice rumbled, a tomb built for secrets, not the dead. Their footsteps echoed against rusted beams. Sarah muttered, Carter warned us of monsters in daylight, yet here they thrive in darkness. Richard's eyes scanned the shadows. Because darkness obeys them, Sarah said, and still you walk forward. Richard's jaw tightened, because stepping back means surrender. Sarah's voice quivered, what if the city has already surrendered? Richard's tone was steel, then we drag it screaming back to truth. The air grew colder as silence pressed against their chests like a weight. Richard Hale said, the deceiver plays both ally and executioner. Sarah Mitchell muttered, then their mask will slip soon. Richard's eyes narrowed. Masks always slip under pressure. Sarah whispered, but at whose cost? Richard's voice darkened at ours, if we're not careful. A faint noise echoed, metal scraping stone. Sarah's breath caught, we're not alone. Richard drew his pistol slowly. The keeper's hand reaches everywhere. Sarah steadied her voice. Then let them reach, but they'll find us ready. Richard's tone sharpened. Readiness is survival. Betrayal is death. Their breaths echoed, louder than footsteps. Sarah Mitchell whispered, if betrayal lurks, then who among us bleeds first? Richard Hale said grimly, we bleed together, or not at all. Sarah's eyes glistened, you'd rather die than walk away. Richard's jaw tightened, truth has no exit. The echo of footsteps approached, deliberate and slow. Sarah muttered, the city's heartbeat is in this room. Richard's eyes hardened, then let it know who carries its pulse. A gear flickered briefly in shadow, then disappeared. Sarah whispered, was it the informant? Richard growled, or the betrayer. Their silence afterward carried the weight of both suspicion and resolve. Richard Hale said, we are not hunting shadows, we are hunted by them. Sarah Mitchell replied, then let them come. Richard's voice dropped lower, they already have. A sudden bang echoed, rattling rusted beams. Sarah gasped, they're here. Richard steadied his aim, then this is where the descent ends or begins. Sarah whispered, and if we do not rise? Richard's eyes burned, then we fall carrying truth. The silence stretched before another sound of movement crawled through the walls. Sarah muttered, the city is bleeding. Richard's voice was cold fire, then we stop it before it drowns us all. Richard Hale said, the shadows end here. Sarah Mitchell whispered, then let the light find us ready. A door creaked open inside the warehouse, revealing Edward Monroe with a calm smile. Monroe's voice carried power, you chased ghosts, detective, yet all you found was silence. Richard's jaw tightened, not silence, your voice buried in it. Sarah's tone cut sharp, you orchestrated this tragedy to protect yourself. Monroe smirked, truth is useless when it destroys order. Richard's voice rumbled, order built on corpses is no order at all. Monroe leaned forward, and yet the city obeys. Sarah whispered, not tonight. Lightning split the sky as silence pressed in. Edward Monroe said, do you think truth frees you? Truth only chains you to despair? Richard Hale growled, better chained to despair than complicit in lies. Sarah Mitchell's eyes glistened. Elizabeth Short was more than your silence. Monroe's voice darkened. She was a liability. Richard's tone thundered. She was a woman murdered because of power like yours. Monroe smirked coldly. Her death ensured the city's survival. Sarah muttered, no city survives on blood. Richard's eyes narrowed. You are the killer hiding behind polished words. Monroe's smirk vanished as thunder roared, rattling the iron beams above them. Richard Hale said, Elizabeth's silence will not be your shield anymore. Monroe's eyes flickered. You think justice cares for a corpse? Sarah Mitchell cried, her voice lives in the truth we bring. Monroe smirked bitterly. Truth dies when no one listens. Richard growled, then we force them to hear. Monroe stepped closer, and when the city chooses comfort over truth. Sarah's voice trembled, then we make comfort impossible. Richard's eyes burned, you cannot bury every scream. Monroe whispered, but I buried hers. Silence slammed between them, heavier than the storm above. Sarah Mitchell whispered. He admits it, Richard. Richard Hale's tone was steel. Then confession becomes his sentence. Monroe laughed bitterly. You think words change the city? It will erase you as easily as her. Richard's voice thundered, not while I breathe. Monroe stepped closer, eyes flashing. Then breathe your last, detective. Sarah muttered, you fear exposure more than death. Monroe's voice cracked with fury. I fear nothing. Richard leaned forward, pistol unwavering. Then fear truth, because it comes for you now. Lightning struck, shaking the warehouse like judgment. Richard Hale said, the city may forget, but history will not. Edward Monroe snarled, history is written by survivors. Sarah Mitchell whispered, then survivors must speak louder than shadows. Richard's voice cut through thunder, Elizabeth Short will not remain your silence. Monroe's glare hardened, you will be crushed under the weight of truth. Richard growled, then let it crush me, but let it bury you too. Sarah's eyes blazed, tonight, the city learns its shame. Lightning exploded above, and silence fell heavy, carrying the weight of revelation. The storm became their witness, and the truth refused to die.